Good evening and welcome. I wanted to devote these three sessions we have in the challenge weekend to concentrate each on a different prelude, and I thought to organize my whole series of episodes exploring every prelude and fugue. I made 40 plus hours of 96 episodes of video, and it's very old stuff, but I think there's some interesting stuff in it. But I'm finding now that with the Well-Tempered Clavier, Book One, as we are celebrating its Tricentennial in 2022, that it's really a time where we should examine this volume on its own. We tend to equate them somehow monolithically as one item, but of course they come from very different times of his life. And actually, as Trevor Pinnock recently said in a promotion for his own recording of Volume 2, now just out on Deutsche Grammophon, he said that that Book 2 was written for himself. And I think that's a fair statement. I think these are not instructional pieces insofar as Book One definitely is. As a matter of fact, there are several of the pieces that ended up in Book One and in the simpler keys of Book Two that started out as training exercises in the notebook for Wilhelm Friedman Bach. And these were, many times they were just very simple technical exercises, and they were for the training of sound production and clarity. So there wasn't anything particularly virtuosic about but the idea was that there was variety to uncover within this very simple pattern. I mean, it's first and foremost, a historical thing, a historical resonance, as everything Bach created was a reference to the past. This is a classic prelude in the form that would have just found its way on a piece of parchment as whole notes, delineating a harmony, and the keyboardist would be elaborating either quite at length or just as a rolling chord, the harmonies, and that's exactly what we have here. But he's prescribed the pattern that he wants us to work with, and I maintain that my method goes through the 48 chronologically, or at least as far as where they fall in the book. And I now maintain that if I were doing it over again, I would just do the simpler keys of Book One. Reason being because that I think there's a more finite set of tools available to us in the C Major Prelude than there is. Well, it's just a matter of, a student comes to me with their favorite prelude and fugue, and invariably it's the F sharp minor this or the C sharp minor, and the most complex pieces in the set. And so of course there's lots to chew on, but the idea of having these preludes, which each one of them sophisticated or less overtly sophisticated, each present a finite set of tricks that will help you address the subject matter that he's given us. Upward motion, downward motion. The idea of repetition is the first thing that we address here. But yeah, just conceptually though, I just felt it. If I were going to do this whole series again, I would go just from C major, and then talk about the G major, and actually I would probably talk about the G major in Book Two too, because that has a very tutorial kind of feel to it again, and an important set of tools that we work with extensively in the method that I think are very clearly delineated and not just suggested, but really prescribed by the material. D major, yes, absolutely the same kind of thing. And in my own work, I've found that each time I come back to this C major, I've learned something new, and of course I'm listening to something in a new way. And so I'll share with you what it is that I've arrived at. So the idea here is that there are a couple of things that we need to address. One is the idea of this as a binary rhythm. That this is not a 2/4 measure repeated. This is actually a 4/4 bar, and so there is a sense of a strong beat, and if not a weaker beat, at least a response. And how do we differentiate that? And my first opening with this set was the whole idea of Bach as primarily a composer of vocal music, and that as pianists particularly, we have a sort of a binary articulative sense. Things are either connected or they're separate. And I felt that if a composer was primarily a vocal composer, this is the most expressive instrument ever created. And there are as many articulations, I say, as there are consonants in any sung language. And there are as many ways of connecting these words or notes as there are elisions or breaths or gasps or stops. And so I think it's a matter of finding that sense of malleability of articulation. And I also find there are many ways in which we can have a more malleable sense of dynamic contrast. But so if we take as a given that we can have short notes or long notes of varying articulations and not necessarily quite stark, I started differentiating in terms of not just between 1, 2, and 3 and 4, but I sought to find some kind of differentiation within that figure. The right and I got very fond of the idea of using the possibility of using the second half of that bar as an echo, or in differentiating the second weak beat from the first strong beat, to maybe use that time as a connective tissue. And so I came up with this plan that wasn't quite strict, but had to do with connection, and then that was quite a bit shorter. And then again, I start short, and so I'm going with the sonority in order to let that be the thing that spills over. So I'm not actually making any crescendo towards the bar line, but I am making a sense of impending quality to the sound by creating a detachment and then going towards a connection. But the thing that I found on this go-round that I really got excited about, and it's very, very difficult to do, is we're looking at yes, you're looking at my score, and we're looking at these the streams of notes, and one of the hardest things that I know how to do is how to let go of the keyboard. I'm a great believer that despite the fact that every note that we play is a downstroke on the piano, I feel that we have to somehow cultivate a sense of buoyancy, a sense of flight, a sense of throwing notes into the air. And that there has to be some kind of palpable way of doing that. I mean, I've had teachers who, just like lift my hand off the keyboard, and, chamber music coaches and things like that. But I think part of it is that we have this visual response, this continuum. And because they're all belonging to the same 16th note flagging, we tend to want to create a continuum that is not necessarily there. So I've started on this go round. I'm seeing all of these moments where we are throwing notes to the air and then coming down. And so I don't see them as connected as. I think they're different things. And so here, I'm looking for a new thing when I come down. I'm not looking for it to continue. That's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in making that differentiation, and you'll notice I'm not doing a big difference in articulation, but there's a sense of length and quasi-legato, and there's a sense of lightness. But the most important part of it is this sense of cultivating that sense of really allowing it to rise. We often, and I'm guilty of this, and I think, although it is illuminating to think of, I often think in terms of dynamic direction, contour dynamics is what I really refer to it as. So we tend to, as pianists, grow towards the upper note. It's a natural sort of lyric instinct. But I see this as this is a chord, and we're actually, the warmth of the lower voice is filling in the upper voice, and I think the more we go towards the upper, it's creating a promise that it really can't keep. And so that's another reason why I wanted to, lift my own arm off the keyboard whenever I would do something else now. Don't connect. No. One of the things that also gives one courage in lifting the hands off the key is what I refer to as elective evaporation. We have here in the left hand, these two voices are marked through. But I tend to take these note heads as placeholders. I do not believe that they are ever designating, they are ever prescriptive, absolutely, of length, of eventual length. Even if we saw this, if that was written in a viola and a second violin part, what if it were marked pizzicato? I mean, there would be nothing. I mean, it would ring to a certain degree. It would certainly not ring for an entire half note, nor would its partner. And so I think there are many ways that we can use this to our advantage. One is if we actually evaporate a little bit before we get to that echo part, we can actually accentuate it by virtue of being the only voice singing. So in other words, and I have that wonderful 30-foot reverb too. But yeah, we hear the sound receding, and we hear it receding without imposition or impediment. It's not. I'm not hanging on here for any particular reason. There's no real reason. We know what the harmony is, and we know what the impetus was. It's happened. We don't need to be having it in our face. This is one of the advantages and disadvantages. I have the keyboard set up. I have the Casio set up in Pianotech, and I'm playing their version of a New York Steinway concert grand, and I'm using their sort of large concert hall ambience, and it's one that I've copied exactly from my other real favorite concert grand in the system, which is a Bechstein, recorded and physically modeled at the Teldec Studios in Berlin. So, but I wanted to give you as close as real as we could get, because one of the disadvantages of the modern concert grand in general is that sostenuto, is that sense that the sound will not die. I mean, my favorite technician, Richard Davenport, who completely rebuilt my 120-year-old B, he was here when my Concert D arrived from New York, and he just hit one note on it and held it. And I said, Richard, sit down, have a go at it. He said, no, that's all I need, because he played it and it went and kept going. He said, yeah, you got a good one. But that's a problem, because Bach presented these pieces as exercises and etudes in cultivating clarity and counterpoint. Holding everything through just because that's what it says on the page is not a good enough reason. I'm constantly gratified and astonished when I enlighten folks that I'm working with, not to something that they've ignored, but the fact that no one's ever really told them that it's not really a matter of bringing something out. If you want to bring something out, cut something else away. It's like Michelangelo said, he was, at a certain point, just cutting away everything that wasn't the sculpture. It became quite simple. When we're trying to bring something out, we invariably use our dynamic prowess on the piano and the ability to sustain, but we're constantly vying with each other, because we're always this dreaded idea of balance, because we like to have this idea of a balance between the bass and the melody, and it should be implacable and strong. And in fact, it's so much more fun when it's more pliable, and when we decide how much support we need and how much transparency we need. And it's that transparency that really is where all the personal creativity comes from. And when folks realize that it's not about bringing something out, it's about cutting something back on purpose, determining the length of a note, as we say in Leon's second law. Picking the notes up is one of our responsibilities that we normally relegate to the pedal. So here, if I want to gain a little bit more lyricism in that very transparent final echo of those 3/16ths, I actually let go a little bit early. I don't let go early enough so that I feel uncomfortable establishing that real detachment, because what I'm doing in the right hand is I'm really quite detached when I get there, but it doesn't sound like that because I'm continuing with the warmth with the left hand at that moment, and then as I go up, I'm evaporating. I call it selective evaporation. And here, what I decide to do is I'm going to hold through because I want to make that implicit. I want to make that explicit. And now this. So when we're back with this, I think it's important to note the last time I went through with this piece, Another one of the tricks that I thought was something that I would never really understand how to do, but came to embrace, and it has really, I really believe, has freed me enormously, is the idea of the elements of the piece, of the subject, the syllables of the subject. And in fact, the preludes are as tight, as tautly constructed as the fugues in their economy of elements and means. Last time through, I became a much more adept and passionate observer of the powers of agogic. Um, Look up in the English, in the Oxford Dictionary, the meaning of agogic. It goes quite far into describing it as not only a lingering on a note, in other words, accent by expression, basically, rather than force. It describes agogic as every aspect of espressivo, rubato, rallentando, accelerando, stringendo. These are all of the things that agogic covers. You'll notice it has nothing to do with dynamics. Why? Because this is strictly the provenance of the harpsichord. I mean, this is where we came up with the idea, how does one create a sense of trajectory on a keyboard that does not have any dynamic contrast? We linger on a note and then move through a string of sixteenths. We create a sense of momentum and trajectory. When we use intonation, which is by any means available, the conveyance of an interval, whether it's a minor second, which is invariably close, painful, and likely overheld. The difference between that and a major second is invariably a step, as we call it, a whole step. It should feel like a step. And all of these intervals have their intonation. But in order to intone them, one of the ways we engage is with agogic, not only lingering on a note, but I feel also inserting a little bit of space between each exchange of voices, not just at the entrance of a voice, but to each exchange of voices. The idea behind that spurred further thought to me was the idea that we have very often little syncopations in Bach, and I felt that this was not a signal for rhythmic excitement, but in fact a way of saying put the brakes on. The figuration itself, I believe, tells us quite a lot in terms of the momentum, and this can be expressed agogically, either in terms of inserting space between figures, in terms of inserting varying degrees of dark matter, the inner rhythm compressing or expanding. So this became much more of a freewheeling. We respond to the visual cues of how the notes fall on the page, and we see a continuum. And what we need to see is the actual figures themselves. We need to isolate them to a certain degree, at least intellectually, and look at them and try and find the truth of them. So here I start out with a feeling of connection. I also have a very palpable idea of not going up towards the top, but allowing like an evanescence to allow the sound to fill from the bottom to the top, so that the eventual sound is as if I'm making a diminuendo. You can see it actually in the score. I'm making a diminuendo to the top. So I'm really, I believe that there is a truth to every gesture. I think there is a truth to every harmonic interaction. And I think that is where a lot of the variety of this piece comes from. I think if one acknowledges the freedom of the material itself to really guide us in terms of how fast we move, the idea that this is and then this is an echo. It's also an echo not just in terms of sound, it's an echo in terms of time. Because again, we think, I'm always thinking about how would we do this on a harpsichord? You couldn't do an echo dynamically on the harpsichord, but you could, in an exaggerated way, I'll do it now. So I'm, in those passages where I'm seeking connection, I'm overholding them, but I'm also maintaining a little bit quicker momentum in those notes that kind of belong together and want to surge to the next thing, rather than the things that are echoes in all kinds of spirited ways. So yes, my idea was to really address each of the pieces, each of the preludes, in exactly their limited and liberating tools and patterns. And it's funny because every time I come back to it, it's just a new thing to work on. As I say, the last time was the embrace of agogic, which is to say, the material dictates momentum. I don't even use the idea of tempo anymore. I really don't. And actually, it can only really get us into trouble, and still gets me into trouble. I'm recording 3 preludes and fugues a day. The quarters finished of the 48. I recorded up to the F minor in Book 2 today. Yes, Ashley and I had such a wonderful time. Oh my gosh, we had 2 hours on the C minor, a couple of movements of the C minor partita. I think we're going to have to figure out a different way to do it so that one or both of us are actually catching not our camera feed via OBS, but our actual Zoom feed, because now we have 2 completely wonderful close-ups of both of us, but there are times when I think it'll be possible for me to cut just to your camera and I can hear myself decently, and the places where I'm nattering on, I'll cut back and forth. But it's enormous. I mean, we 2 hours, and then Katerina and I spent 2 hours together on the E minor toccata. So this C major prelude, as I was saying, the pieces that are most often gravitated to in the Well-Tempered Clavier by students and professionals alike are those that are most challenging, and I maintain that even if I were going to do a new sort of method, I would probably do them, so probably in the circle of fifths, at least for a little while. So echoes have, all kinds of meaning, and once we embrace the agogic elements, it becomes quite simple just to really affect that in time. And also, if we decide to evanesce completely, or whether we want to engage with the left hand, is also completely up to us. the other thing that becomes immediately apparent is that it's really absolutely useless to consider using the pedal at all, because we can choose our resonances. I mean, one thing I haven't really talked about, and probably would make it a lot easier to play, is the whole idea of maybe overholding a little bit in the right hand when we have our legato thing. So for instance, yeah, I mean, if I get out of my own way, I think I can actually, do something interesting once in a while. So yeah, I like the idea of addressing the earlier and simpler. Well, they not earlier, just I mean the simpler keys in terms of method. And as Trevor Pinnock said, Book 2 is largely for himself. I don't think they're teaching pieces. I believe these are really teaching pieces. Each one of them. I think it's no accident that, for instance, the B minor in Book 1 is the first appearance of any invitation for repeats. Binaries, A section, B section, repeats, invitations for ornamentation, elaboration. It's just like that was we finally got to that part of the method, I guess. After at the end of the first 24, it's like I said, okay, I think you know what you're doing, to a certain degree. I think we can be trusted to elaborate at will. I just can't tell you. It's so wonderful to just be sort of conversant with this material on such an intimate level, and yet to find every time I sit down to any of these pieces something completely new, or something that I think I knew, but really knew better now than I did the last time I worked through it, maybe a week ago, 2 weeks ago. So yeah, it's very, very exciting. Very, very exciting. So yes, I can't believe it. So, oh my goodness. So Ashley is just such a wonderful person. There were so many things that Ashley had done and gained and embraced since the first time we worked together, that it was so gratifying and so inspiring to hear her engaged, not with the method, but engaged with the music to the degree that she was able to project to us, the listening audience, her personal truth of the music. So yeah, we had a free old time. I'm wondering how it came out on your end, Ashley. We actually tried doing. I played the left hand in the prelude of the C minor, the little andante, and because I maintained she was being a little bit police-like with the left hand, and I maintained if she was just able to play the right hand as she wished, and had somebody who could be dutifully depended on to just play the bass note where it belonged according to where the vocal line wanted it to go, I think we could learn something. And so things loosened up quite a lot, and just so much fun. So I'm gonna make that my prime directive when I get up at probably 3:30 in the morning. I'm going to cut that together and Katrina's session on the E minor. It's, as I say, they're each 2 hours long, and we lost the connection once or twice, but we got it, and I'll try and make good work of it soon. Thank you so much, Ashley, for playing so beautifully and working so well. She's so so self-critical, and I insist that it's not that she was she didn't see something. It's something that she's something her perspective has widened, her perspective has expanded in the time that we work together. Because her devotion to Bach is evident. Her teacher, Dr. Bernadette Harvey, absolutely evident. Her love of the music, and this is just, you know what? It's all new to me too. It is. Oh, great! The delay of the bass line through the Zoom was very freeing. Yes, yay! I love it. I can't wait to hear it. I can't wait to hear it because it was so much fun to do. So yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, one thing I do want to mention just in passing has to do with this idea of these ostinatos as non-continuous figuration. I like very much now not thinking of these as, and I've really thought continuously about telling everybody about to lighten their thumb. But I've come to the idea that I'm really encouraging my skyward trajectory, thinking of these as not connected to the next beat, so that the whole bar becomes one sonority. It's not. It just isn't. Just let them evaporate, evanesce. The more you evanesce, the more you evaporate with the right hand in really quickness and fleet shortness. You can hold on with the left hand and create a sonority that makes you absolutely comfortable with that. Why would you ever want to have competing, I mean, if you were a string player, you would lean heavily on the changing notes and allow the others just to resonate. And we have to do that all the time as pianists. Where's the and the whole idea of ostinatos. I'm really a great believer now, I think, in making distinction of the last two of every 16th note pair, so that I really can't really see a reason to play something like, I don't see that as a viable pattern. I just don't. It's either or it's or that's another possibility. But this, no. We can allow these figures to evaporate and resuscitate, and we don't need to grind them into the ground. So that really, all comes. This whole go around really comes from my desire for flight. Right? I mean, wings of an angel. That one. So, good night, all. We'll talk about the G major tonight, tomorrow night, same time, same station. Thank you for joining me. Take care.